Today, we'll be diving into the cozy farming game, Stardew Valley, and recreate a delicious looking dish and a drink from each of the 4 seasons that you can unlock throughout the game. Food and cooking aren't critical parts of the game, but as someone whose actual dream is to live on a farm and just cook and bake all day, I love being able to unlock new recipes and make them in my little kitchen. And since you're playing a small town farmer, not only do you learn recipes by becoming friends with your neighbors, but you also need to forage and catch all of the seasonal produce to actually make the recipes, which is so wholesome. And speaking of recipes, the official Stardew Valley cookbook was just recently released earlier this year, so throughout the video I'll be referring to its recipes, but also making a few small adjustments here and there. Okay, let's get comfy, relax, and head over to the farm. Also, really quick before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you to my sibling Evan for sending me all of these clips you're seeing. I love you, and yeah, let's get into it. I thought it would make sense for us to start off this video with spring, since the game begins on the first day of the spring season. It was so difficult to choose just one dish for the sake of this video, but this first recipe just screams spring to me. With its vibrant color and flavor, it's the rhubarb pie, which just so happens to be my favorite flavor, so I'm even more excited for this. First, we're putting together a simple pie crust. Into a mixing bowl, add the flour, sugar, and cold butter, which you need to cut into cubes first. And I'm cutting the butter into the dry ingredients by pressing them together with my fingertips until it roughly comes together. Here you can add a bit of ice water if it needs help forming into a dough. Then transfer this mix onto the counter and quickly bring the dough together with your hands. Divide this dough into 2 balls and wrap them in parchment paper. Place them into the fridge for at least 1 to 2 hours. Onto the filling, grab the rhubarb stalks and cut them into small bite-sized pieces, around a 1/4 inch or so if you want to be precise. Grab a large mixing bowl and toss the rhubarb chunks with a bit of sugar and salt and set that aside for about 1 hour. Okay, back to the crust. Take one of the discs of dough and roll it out to about 2 to 3 inches larger than the pie dish you're using. The one I'm using here is around 9 inches, so I rolled mine out to about 12 because math. And we're just going to gently transfer this into the pie dish. No worries if the dough cracks or breaks a little bit during that process. You can just patch it up with your fingers afterwards. By this point, the rhubarb filling should be a little syrupy, so we're going to add a few spoons of flour to thicken it up. And while that does its thing, roll out the other disc of dough this is going to be the top crust. To finish off the filling, we're adding even more sugar, and to give the pie that iconic Stardew Valley look, cut out a tiny star into the middle of the rolled out piece of dough. And then we can assemble the pie. The rhubarb filling goes in, followed by the second piece of rolled out dough right on top. You can go ahead and cut any excess dough that might be around the sides and then fold it under itself to create a sort of crust. I'm just using my fingers here to smooth everything out and crimp it into this sort of pattern, but you can also leave it the way it is or just use a fork to make a little design. And yeah, we can finally pop that into the oven to bake. So the cookbook actually includes one drink for each season. So for spring, we have ginger ale, which I think will actually pair perfectly with the flavors of the pie and hopefully alleviate any nausea from all of the sugar I'll be eating today. Start by preparing the ginger and lime zest, and please be very careful with your fingers here. Then simply place all of the ginger syrup ingredients into a small saucepan. That's the ginger, lime zest, some sugar, honey, and water. Simmer this on low for 15 to 25 minutes, and yeah, just set that aside to cool completely. Once it's cooled, you can add in some freshly grated ginger, and pour that through a strainer so that we just end up with this beautiful, slightly sweet, slightly spicy syrup. And yeah, the drink is just made up of some ice, seltzer water. I'm using sparkling here because I don't really know the difference between the two. But anyways, add in some of the ginger syrup we just made, give that a nice stir, and top it with a wedge of lime on top, just to make it cute. Yeah. This turned out to be a great combination and super reminiscent of spring, very bright and bold in flavor, and it had the perfect balance of the earthy, tart, and sweet notes. The pie was so good. I couldn't make this video without recreating what I think is one of the most iconic dishes from the game, the Lucky Lunch. I just love how whimsical it looks and how it's literally described as a special little meal. Also, can someone please teach me how to fish? I have watched so many tutorials, but I literally cannot comprehend what to do. Like, do I hold down the button? Do I spam it? I don't know, but if you have any tips, I'd greatly appreciate it. But back to the recipe. According to the cookbook, Lucky Lunch is a shrimp ceviche served on a bed of greens with star-shaped tortilla chips. So let's start with the ceviche. Bring a pot of water to a boil over medium-high heat while we prep all of the vegetables. To the boiling water, add in a pinch of salt and a squeeze of lime juice, along with all of the shrimp, letting them poach for 3 to 4 minutes. Then toss everything together in a large mixing bowl. Season that with some grated garlic, some sugar, a pinch of salt, a ton of lime juice, and olive oil. Ideally, you'll let this sit in the fridge for 2 to 4 hours, but I ended up leaving it overnight and it still tasted great in my opinion. So the next day, I got started with the tortilla chip stars. Grab a few corn tortillas and using either a cookie cutter or maybe a stencil out of paper, cut out a few little star shapes from the tortillas. The cookbook calls for 6-inch stars, but I only had this 4-inch cookie cutter, I think, so I guess I'll be making tiny lucky lunches. Once the tortilla chips are nice and crispy, we can do the final touches. So I chopped up some romaine lettuce as our bed of greens and stirred in the avocado chunks and cilantro and chive into the ceviche mix. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So I initially followed their instructions on how to plate up the dish, but I ended up not liking how messy and weird the stars look on top here. So I recommend just adding more ceviche to the center and stacking all 3 of the chips right on top of that. I think it looks cuter and more similar to the game animation this way. But yeah, let me know what you think. Okay, for our summery drink, we'll have to head over to the beach resort and grab a Pina Colada. Unfortunately, we can't just buy one from Gus, so into a small saucepan, I whisked together a can of coconut cream, some sugar, and a pinch of salt. Give that about an hour over low heat to reduce and thicken into almost like a coconut condensed milk. Once that's completely cooled, I just tossed everything into a blender. We have frozen pineapple, ice, coconut water, a splash of apple juice, and lemon juice since I ran out of limes while making the ceviche earlier. and some of that cream of coconut we just made, and yeah, just give that a nice blend. Again, I really do think that these fit the summer season. They're both super light and refreshing, and I'm not gonna lie, I ended up eating what was supposed to be 4 servings of Lucky Lunch all by myself right after I turned off the camera. So these recipes are actually really good. Yeah. Fall isn't only my favorite season in real life, but also in-game as well. I've lived in California my entire life, so it makes me so happy to be able to experience the iconic, cozy autumnal vibes vicariously through my little farmer character. And the epitome of a cozy fall dish to me is pumpkin soup. First, let's prep the pumpkin itself. I cut up this acorn squash into small cubes, and because it's summer when I'm actually filming this, I couldn't find the kabocha squash. Kabocha? The squash that the original recipe called for, so this'll have to do. But yeah, just a tip if you run into the same situation. I think this turned out really tasty regardless, so you can substitute that. Also, pumpkin can be super tough to cut and peel, so again, please be careful of your fingers and pay attention during this part. Unlike me, who was distracted by my cats eating the pumpkin scraps off of the floor under me. I placed the squash chunks onto a baking sheet along with some olive oil, some salt, and pepper. Just making sure everything is evenly coated before popping that into the oven and letting these guys roast at 400 degrees for around 40 minutes. For the aromatics, I quickly chopped up some onion, garlic, and ginger. I'm adding some butter to a medium-sized pan over medium heat and sauteing the onions along with some salt and pepper for 5 to 6 minutes. Add in the garlic and ginger, then add in the apple cider vinegar, and the herbs, which call for rosemary, thyme, and bay leaves here. Let that boil and reduce about 5 minutes. Then you can dump in the vegetable stock and roasted pumpkin. Bring everything to a boil, and I let this simmer for around 30-ish minutes. Meanwhile, I got started on the pecorino frico. That'll be a garnish for the soup, which is actually really simple. It's just grated pecorino romano cheese tossed with a few pepitas, also known as pumpkin seeds, I believe, and baked until they sort of resemble a cheese chip. These actually taste so good on their own, so try not to snack on all of them while we finish off the soup. Before we pour this into the blender, remove the herbs we added earlier since they're done doing their job. And then you're just gonna blend this until smooth. I also ended up adding a little more vegetable stock since it was a bit thick for my liking. And upon tasting it, I wasn't getting that warm, spiced flavor I was going for, so I also sprinkled in some cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg as well. While that simmers for a couple more minutes, let's make the other garnish, which is this sour cream drizzle, by just stirring together a couple spoons of sour cream, a bit of milk to loosen up the consistency until it's to your liking, and then pepper for a bit of flavor. Yeah, that's it. So cozy. To go along with the warm, spiced pumpkin soup, let's pair that with a glass of cold, refreshing cranberry candy, which I think matches perfectly with the festive holiday vibes we have going on. For this drink, we're making yet another sugar syrup, but this time with frozen cranberries plus brown sugar, salt, and water. Let this simmer for a good 20 to 25 minutes. And once you see that all of the cranberries have bursted, turn off the heat and stir in the vanilla. And just like before, pour this mixture through a strainer to extract this thick, sweet, and sour syrup to use in our drink. These two did not disappoint on the cozy festive vibes. The cranberry candy somehow ended up tasting exactly like a green apple Jolly Rancher, just melted down, which was highly addictive. So yeah, I highly recommend that one. If there's one thing I love about Stardew Valley, it's Krobus. He's just a cute little guy with impeccable business acumen, and he loves to be gifted void mayo along with the very accurately named Strange Bun. So this one's for you, Krobus. The base of the strange bun is, of course, a bun, so let's start with the bread dough. This recipe seems to be for a sort of milk bread, which gets its soft and fluffy texture from adding a milk and flour paste to the dough, so let's set that aside for now. Into a large mixing bowl, I'm combining the brown sugar and yeast here. The original recipe calls for malted milk powder, which I didn't have, so I subbed in this hojicha tea powder, which should hopefully give us the same kind of roasty, nutty flavor. To that, I added the buttermilk and egg. Give that a good mix. To all of that, add the rest of the flour and the paste from earlier. With the spatula first, mix everything together until it roughly comes together, and then get in there with your hands until you get a smoothish dough ball. Now you can add the softened butter about a tablespoon at a time, kneading just until it's no longer sticky. Then transfer this onto your surface, kneading some more until the dough is elastic and smooth, about 5 to 7 minutes. Allow this to rise in a warm space for about 2 hours. During that time, we can prep the void mayo that these get served with, and that starts with some black garlic. It looks kind of crazy and intimidating, but actually super tasty. To make the mayo, dissolve the activated charcoal in some lemon juice. This already looks very scary, but regardless, I added in the egg yolk, some Dijon mustard, and a pinch of salt. Now, very slowly drizzle in the oil while constantly whisking the entire time. I highly recommend a mixer or blender for this part. Otherwise, your arms will be very tired. But when that starts to look thick and creamy, you know, like a mayo, you can go ahead and add a little more lemon juice and the black garlic paste. But don't worry if it starts to look a little thin at this stage. The mayo should set up a bit as it chills. Now grab the bread dough. It should almost be doubled in size. And I'm deflating it with just my hands and cutting it into 6 equal-ish pieces. Roll each one into a thin rope, about 16 inches long. And then we're going to use these to form the strange buns. So at this point, the instructions were very confusing for me to follow, but this is what I got from it. I basically swirled the dough into the muffin tins to form 3 layers, each one getting a little skinnier as you get to the top, kind of looking like a seashell. Not sure if that's quite right, but then it says to stick a skewer into the centers of each one, then to let them rise for about an hour or so. And finally, we can pop those into the oven. These definitely turned out a bit wonky and strange, but the final step is to put together the lobster filling. To a pot of salted boiling water, drop in your lobsters and give those 8 to 10 minutes. You can tell they're done when the shells are bright red, and then I transferred them directly into an ice bath to make peeling them a bit easier. Then to a medium-sized skillet, I added a ton of salted butter, turned the heat to medium, and added in some black pepper as well. Once the butter is browned, which you can tell by the little golden specks that form at the bottom of the pan, I turned the heat off and tossed in the herbs, or the flavorings, so sage, lemon zest, and grated garlic. And finally, add in the lobster bits, stirring just to warm everything together. And now we can plate our strange buns. Okay, that was a lot. So for an energy boost after this very all-consuming recipe, let's make a triple shot espresso. This all starts the day before, so welcome to my coffee bar. We're essentially making a spiced cold brew concentrate. So first I'm grinding up my coffee beans. And add that to a large jar along with the spices. The original recipe calls for whole spices and a spice grinder, but I don't have one, so I'm charring the cinnamon sticks to extract some of that flavor. And then sprinkling in some ground cinnamon, clove, and cardamom on top of the coffee grounds. Top this all off with some cold water, and then this goes into the fridge for 18 to 24 hours. And the next day, I just strained out all of the coffee grounds and cinnamon stick to be left with the espresso. It's recommended to enjoy this as is or to use it in your favorite espresso-based drink. Ugh, very bitter. So I made myself a classic vanilla iced latte. I thoroughly enjoyed this dish a lot, actually, as well as all of the dishes that we made today, but I like that they didn't scare away from the complex and difficult recipes and really did highlight the fresh seasonal ingredients. I know it's a lot of work, but out of the ones we tried today, I highly recommend the strange bun and void mayo combo. Gosh, that sounds so weird. But it was genuinely so tasty, and the void mayo definitely doesn't taste like burnt hair.